what vitamins and supplements do you recommend, if any? Like,
super simple.
Okay.
Super simple. Creatine, non-negotiable. Protein powder, non-negotiable. If you can't get it through food, which most of us can't, and pre-workout if you'd like it. If it makes you pre-workout, if it makes you feel energized, go for it. But in terms of the multivitamins and I'm minorly deficient in this and macro doses of vitamin C. It's just not supported when it comes to performance all that much. So focus on a varied diet, because it's the challenge with all these vitamins and minerals. You can't just take one and have it do its job, right? It relies on something else, which relies on something else. So it's almost like you're building a car at the Ford plant, and you're just like, I'm going to hammer this place with wheels. You're like, it's nice to have wheels, yes, but without the car, what's the point? Yeah, that's right.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, that's helpful.
Is there a certain time you would take creatine? Like, does it matter when you
Great
take it?
question. Most of the research says that after workout is best, but we get to the point where it's statistical significance versus practical significance, meaning that they'll have enough people in a study and study it for long enough that they'll report a difference, but the difference is statistically significant, but makes no difference to the actual reality of things. For me, I take it first thing in the morning just because that's when I remember to take it. Yeah, simple as that. For you guys, 5 grams would be plenty. Yeah, I take 10. It's just because it's stored in your muscles. It's related to your muscle mass. 5 grams a day. By the way, it's not a thing to cycle off. There's no necessity to that. Just 5 grams a day forever, and you're totally fine. It's the same principle as something like carbohydrates, where you need that to be able to get into your muscle and do its job, and your body to understand that, absorb that, and so it requires a little bit of time up front. Yeah, it'll make you put on a couple of pounds as well.
Along with that, like you said, since like protein doesn't have all the stuff that like meat has, and to digest it, is the timing of when you take things that don't have all the vitamins and minerals you need important, or is it just daily intake, like you said?
Yeah.
In terms of recovery, sleep, and nutrition and everything, if hypothetically you had to cut back on one to promote another, how is that ranked?
Well, it's tough, and I would just say treat it as an individual and learn how to monitor yourself. So like for me, number one is I'll get irritable. And so if I notice that I'm getting irritable, I know that I need to sleep. I know that if I don't sleep, I do really poorly. So okay, sleep needs to be number one for me. Nutrition isn't something that has to come and go. That's not really a negotiation. And life stress, how much control do you have over that, right? So it just becomes like, okay, how much sleep can you get?
Yeah.
And if you're actually, maximize it. And then if you're just in a place where you're not recovering very well, then think about taking a deload week. Think about taking a couple of easy sessions. Yeah.
What is your thought on vices like sugar and alcohol?
I love it.
When are they served?
I don't think sugar is a particular vice per se, because it's some of the most useful fuel we can have. And I think putting it always in the context of fuel is important, because sugar during a workout can be highly useful if you can tolerate that. In terms of alcohol, from a health perspective, it's more healthy to have up to 8 drinks a week than to not, so long as those 8 drinks are spread over the week. So how much of a vice is it really? And it just comes down to general responsibility. When it comes to the evidence, it's actually not the end of the world. I drink probably more now than I ever have. Not that much, still, but before comps, I'll have a couple of beers because that helps me get to sleep better. I don't worry so much about the comp. I stay up a little bit later than I would. All things that you would say don't do, but when it comes to the practical significance, if you drink alcohol and that stimulates your parasympathetic nervous system because you're having a quiet night at home and you have a glass of wine and that's what you enjoy, it actually could benefit your recovery even though the alcohol itself is poor, which is a completely different conversation from like you're at the club having a piss up, which is like obviously going to be sympathetic drive and horrible for you. So yeah, I would say there's absolutely nothing wrong with moderation for either of those.
I super chatted you a couple weeks ago asking about your weight when you ran the marathon, and you said it was 225, and I was just wondering, that seems still pretty heavy to run a marathon. Like, was that, like, how did you feel? when you were running?
Some days good, some days bad. I mean, it's running. I never had the experience of running at 170 pounds. When I did my bodybuilding show, if anyone sees that, like it was physique. I was like really, really small. I looked very unwell. I didn't look overly muscular, and I was 195 pounds. So I was 20 pounds heavier than emaciated running marathons, which is pretty reasonable for me that just happens to be 225. I very much believe that I would be 300 pounds whether I wanted to or not. So a good thing I've done it on purpose. Yeah.
Do you feel like the pro scene, since you've been in it, has a very similar like community vibe as like the local scene? Because that's my favorite part of the local scene. Is it's just like a bunch of good people like all encouraging each other and like hyping each other up, even at competitions when you're against the same people you see all the time.
Yeah, 100%. It's the exact same. And the thing about it is, every pro guy falls in love with the local scene, and then the pro thing it happens. You put effort into it, but the thing you love is always what it started as. So I'll still go to the local shows to be able to just go watch. And to me, the most special thing, like, who gives a shit about 10,000 people cheering for me breaking world record? I care a lot more about like someone cheering for, like 10 people cheering for someone for the first time. And like maybe they've never played a sport before. Maybe their dad's a bit disappointed that they weren't a football boy. Like you'll see these guys, and like you'll see what it's like for them to be cheered for. You're like that's so special. And then you'll see girls who participate in strength sports who really CrossFit be the same when you focus on what you're capable of rather than what you look like. And you watch how someone walks in on day one, and you watch how someone walks in on 6 months later, and you're like, we've given birth to a whole new confident version of yourself. It's incredible. And so when you see stuff like that, I don't see how you could get away from it. But I haven't come across, I've come across one pro strongman ever to say that they hoped anyone else did bad on an event. The camaraderie is amazing, and it's part of why my original 3-year timeline is probably extending. People were really worried that I'd win World's Strongest Man and quit, because that's sort of what I said in the past. Yeah, I saw many comments of like, I hope he loses just so that he keeps competing. But I think I have a long way to go anyway, so I'll stick with it. And when that community stays true to the pro level as well, it's sort of hard to give up. It's not dissimilar from the CrossFit guys. You see how they behave towards each other, and it's sort of like you want to beat the other person at their best. And then knowing that all of your best mates are there, and they hope you do your best, even though they hope theirs is better, you're like, it's a pretty positive environment to be around. Yeah. I used to, not anymore. It's not worth it. If you're say like 10 to 20th in the world, that could be like an amazing thing to propel you. But if you're number one in the world, the injury risk associated and the training time dedicated to the one thing is probably far too high. You're probably risking a lot more than you have to gain. So maybe if I start sacking. But for now, I'm gonna avoid it. Also, there's a bunch of guys having a crack at it who I think are better deadlifters than me. So go have your fun. Yeah.
How do you very rarely incorporate conditioning? Because like you're widely regarded as like the fittest strongman. Like you're like very fit. Like how do you incorporate that in kind of throughout the year? Like.
Yeah, well, it's funny. Like so, even 2 weeks leading into comp, training volume and intensity goes down quite a bit. But I find that I will not get weaker over that period, but I'll get unfit over that period. And I will do more aerobic training in the 2 weeks before a show than I do in the entire prep otherwise. Then in the off season, I just go back to the reasons that I am fit. So I'll go back to trying to run. It's nothing like I used to do before. I'll do intervals on the treadmill. But there's also for me health considerations around it. And I think my drive to maintain a relatively healthy aerobic fitness, a relatively healthy body weight and body fat, I think that's more the driver than any sort of athletic outlook to it. And I think I have that perspective because I'm preaching to people all day about being healthy and whatnot. And like, if you're preaching that and you have a hard time, and you're like walking up the stairs gassed, all right, something's got to give here. So yeah, and to be honest, I love it. I love the feeling of being out of breath. You guys all know it. Being out of breath, and then like your lungs, they feel different when you get in the car. You know, there's something weird. They're more open. I don't know. The cobwebs are. And like, I still love that feeling. So yeah, it gets back to government guidelines, 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity a week. If I'm not hitting that and I'm asking other people to, then it's a bit hypocritical.
Does the Canadian government actually recommend that? Wow, good for you guys.
I'm sure there's something.
I don't trust the American government to give us fitness guidelines.
I would assume it's the same in Australia as it is in Canada. I would assume it's the same here. They're not telling people. I'm telling people on their behalf. But they do have a document that says that. yeah, in the fine print.
About 6 months ago, I pulled my back on the lower left side doing a deadlift. I went to the hospital. They did an x-ray on my spine and said everything was fine on the spine.
Sure.
But the VA don't do very much. They threw ibuprofen at me and told me to go home.
Yeah, I've had the same thing.
So it's my left side. I was doing a deadlift, and I pulled the first one, no problem. Went to go pull the second one, and I felt like that right here, on the side, out of the middle.
And what do you feel now?
It kind of goes back and forth. Like it'll start feeling better, and then I'll almost feel that again, and then I'll start feeling better.
How do you go with progressions in terms of load intensity volume and monitoring your progressions week to week?
I've been pretty light for the past 6 months.
Okay, 6 months of light training is a big problem. Yeah, so if we're talking, and it always has to start with an anatomy lesson, right? So, anatomy lesson, what's going on in the low back? You said it's up here?
Yep, it's all right here.
Right here.
Nope.
Okay. In this area, we've got erectors, we've got quadratus lumborum. Over here to the side of it more, we've got all of the small muscles of the glutes as well as the large muscles of the glutes. So if you're saying it's here, we're talking spinal erectors, but the motion you're doing is more likely than not quadratus lumborum. The function of quadratus lumborum being stabilizing the spine on top of the pelvis. And if you did single arm farmer's carry on this side, you did a suitcase carry on the right side, that's going to work quadratus lumborum on the left side. So that's going to be your first go. Now, surface level, that's what it sounds like. Right? And so if you grab that and you start bracing that side and then you go back to load intensity volume, progressively overloading your suitcase carry, it's reasonable to believe that that's going to result in a positive outcome on the opposite side.
Right.
Yeah, just a little bit more exposure to that specific area. Yeah, but always keep in mind, healing times for a torn muscle, if it's intact, like it's not hugely bruised, we're talking 2 to 4 weeks. So, okay, after 2 to 4 weeks, the muscle's healed, stop thinking about it. Right? If it's a bit sore, okay, could you re-injure it? Sure. Will you be guaranteed to re-injure it if you don't expose it to load eventually? Of course you will. Yeah? It's the same reason why lying in bed is the safest thing you can possibly do, but it's also a guarantee of being old and frail one day. Yeah? And a lot of us are doing this to not be old and frail. So what I say is there's a way to train healthy and there's a way to train for performance. Obviously, at the moment, I train for performance, Tim trains for performance, so that if we worried about getting hurt when we were training, it would be like worrying about if the sun's gonna rise, because at some stage, something's gonna pop up and okay. But if you're training for performance, that has to be your attitude. If you're training for health, you still have to accept an inherent risk of doing anything, in which case, okay, I would rather be hurt by choice than be incapacitated by necessity later.